I can't wait to finally introduce the world to my new chief of staff. I've been working on this role for almost a year. Yeah, close to a year. And who you're about to meet is someone I've been talking to for almost that long. And we looked far and wide. We had to define what the role meant because it's a role that SADA didn't have. But I'm really, really excited to have everybody meet my new chief of staff. Please welcome to Cloud and Clear, Michelle Ambrose.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tony.
No, thanks for being my guest, and thanks for coming to SADA. We're really excited to have you. It's something that's completely new for the executive team and for me. So we're all getting the opportunity to sort of blank canvas the role. Obviously, we have some great ideas about what the role will encompass, and we want to talk about that a little down the line. But I'd still love to, first and foremost, just sort of have you introduce yourself. Let's talk about your background. Obviously, you have a funny accent. So that means something usually as far as your history. We'll dive into that. But please, just tell us about you. Let's meet Michelle.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Well, my funny accent is Australian. So, and it's also Australian because it's coloured. I've been outside of Australia for 13 years. So I spent 7 years in London. I've been here in the US for 6 years. So you think it's funny and I sound Australian. When I go home, my mum says, God, you sound American. So I live in between the two, but originally from Australia, I grew up there. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. So my parents grew up, moved around in small businesses in Australia. So actually, the small business part and the growing enterprises has been from very early days. I've been around business. My dad used to sit me down when I was 5 and 5, 6, 7. And we'd go through the bookings. They ran motels and go through the bookings and go through the plan. So there's a lot of where I've ended up in my life that I'm like, oh, this is really familiar. It comes from very early days. But then professionally, I spent the first decade or so of my career in communications, marketing, change management roles. Did my MBA, moved to London with the goal of sort of both traveling and working and experiencing a bit more of the world outside of Australia. And fortunately, I landed about 10 years ago at Google. And it was, what do they say? It's opportunity strikes, but it's also you got to be willing to take risks. That would have never happened if I hadn't left my hometown and been willing to be there, but it was right time, right place. Yeah. And so for the past 10 years at Google, first 5 years, I was in our people operations team there at Google, had a communications role, did some planning and operations work for the Google L&D team. And then for the past 5 years, I got onto the rocket ship that it was the Google Cloud go-to-market organization when they were, I joined apps for work. So earlier iterations, now the workspace team essentially as their chief of staff about 5 years ago. And so spent 5 years in cloud go-to-market. I was the chief of staff for that sales organization. Spent some time in sales operations, doing some sales planning and resource management. Went back to the chief of staff role as the org grew and we were focused more on GCP platform. And then for the past year or so before I've jumped on board at SADA, I was leading the global onboarding, culture, and DEI efforts for Google Cloud. So I've done a number of different roles in that space as the organization has scaled. And yeah, super excited to be on the other side of the fence, helping to do the same work, really, just from in a different role with a different bunch of folks, but really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that we found so relevant, obviously, in our search when we found you, and by the way, I've sort of pointed to you by somebody that we both know very well and respect greatly at Google. We won't name her here, but is that sort of experience, that experience that you have had within the broader Google, but also the early days of the Google Enterprise organization is so relevant in this role that we're going to define together because, there's so many things that, of course, Google is starting to do in a way that's sort of industry standard, but there's so many things about Google that are completely unique and rooted in a deep tradition that, the vision we had for this role sort of it was necessary to have that foundational understanding, of how those things work, because we have that long tradition with Google as well. So a lot of these things are just simply natural and innate and still complex. But I was thinking, like, who in the world could I bring that would not require 2 years to ramp on just the inner workings of, like, what, with Google. And that's why just getting somebody exactly like you was so exciting, and why I think we both took a really long time to make sure that it was right, and we did it the right way. But and also just being at Google for work with the former sort of sales leadership, seeing that period where it was a significant growth of the business, really from something that was quite small. And, SADA's going through our own growth now alongside the broader ecosystem with all public clouds and with Google, which is growing, of course, faster than the other clouds. I wanted to have someone who's seen that sort of exponential journey, which is full of known, potential traps, but also a bunch of unknown risks, and someone who's comfortable with inventing. We have to do a lot of inventing. There's not playbooks for everything that we all need to do.
No, and it's funny as well, because as I mentioned earlier, my career did a lot of change management. So I started off my career in communications. I found myself drawn to, like, the things that were new and changing. And actually, like, when you think about that evolution that cloud go-to-market organization has gone through, and, like, where SADA is at in its growth, like, a lot of it comes down to building things, solving problems, and managing through change. Like when you really think about when you're scaling, whatever type of problem it is, those core motions are at play, whether it's your finance operations or, like, your go-to-market organization or whatever other part you're trying to mature or grow through. And at the core of every single one of those things are human beings who need to do something differently and feel something differently. So I actually, at one point, I've had this, like, through my career, this pivot of, like, I want to do more strategy and operations piece. And I had a real concern sort of middle of my career that, my background in this won't be helpful when I start to do more of this work. Like, I want to get closer to strategy and scaling businesses. And actually, I found that at the crux of the cloud go-to-market evolution. I sort of jumped in as chief of staff, that we did the reorganization of that group. And I was a little like, I'm in sales operations, and I don't know if my skill set is useful here. And I'm still just learning the sales side of this business. But actually what I found was I was one of few people in the room who was like, hey, we have to think about the change management that we're asking people to go through. And that's a really big part of that curve that I think is important and easy to be forgotten in all of the kind of numbers and targets and sales, which are also super important, and that's what we need to focus on. But that's a part that I really enjoy, and I'm excited about doing more of that here at SADA.
Yeah, no, look, understanding the whole, like, lead to cash workflow is really important. And you're right, we do tend to forget what it takes. Get the operations part right as you're growing, because, like, that's the, maybe the least exciting part for a bunch of people, right? But, like, you can't actually grow. You can't book deals. You can't recognize revenue. You can't pay people properly, like, and measure quota and things like that if the sales operations part all the way downstream, like, doesn't work into finance. So I feel like we made great strides, just learning, like, from the pain of running SADA too long on small business types of platforms of, like, all the things we now have had to do in the last couple of years to prepare us for that. But again, having somebody on the team that's mostly outward facing, but can still, understand it, internal impact of everything going on out there, that's customer facing and Google facing, is, I think, really, really critical. The other thing, Michelle, is, like, especially in these executive roles, we're very careful in terms of how we select talent, vet talent, jointly kind of make the decision of fit, and then ultimately, like, bring people over, because there's such important decisions that have a long, multi-year impact to people's lives. And I always want people to find themselves when they are at SADA, I want them to find themselves to be in the best possible position they could be in. Like, this is the right role for this person right now. There's no role that's better. So, and you weren't really looking. I don't think you were looking for anything particular, and you didn't really know that. I mean, you knew of SADA, but we didn't know each other really, and so it was a little bit of a exploration, or a lot of exploration, I think, to come to the conclusion, and obviously have you come over eventually. But what were the types of things that, where do you see the excitement in being on this side, like at a partner, where the customer impact and the market impact and just ecosystem impact is different than being at Google?
Yeah. Yeah, and I wasn't looking, and that's right. Kelly DeCordy, if you're listening. All joking aside. I think the attraction.
Yeah, Kelly, I targeted Michelle
Kelly
specifically. She was not looking. I was like a sniper, just very specific target.
But all joking aside, I think when you came to me with the proposition of the chance, I think to, like, a big thing for me, and again, this I think was some of the uniqueness of the fit that we found, was here's an opportunity. I'd always said, I was just close to 10 years at Google, and I'd always had in my mind like what a privileged. I was very aware of how privileged and I was to have that opportunity, and over the years, like the growth and the things I got to see and be exposed to, I was like, I had this like, we need to share this. Like I was always like, I want to share this at some point. Had always been sort of a mantra. I think as I'd started to hit that, getting to 10 years, I had been starting to percolate on either what was next for me within Google, or is this starting to be a time at which I'm ready to go and think about what that next phase looks like for me. And I think you approached me to really, like, I was really starting to just have that questioning for myself. And I think the opportunity I'd always been fascinated about the channel and this mechanism of actually, like, how do we grow a business and scale through the channel in itself? Like the notion of being somewhere where you can kind of wear lots of hats and be doing lots of pieces, and I think have the size of your impact relative to the size of the organization. I think that was a thing where I feel like as we spoke, there's a lot I can bring to SADA from my experience, but there's also a lot I'm gonna get to do with you that is like really interesting, exciting for me to get stuck into. So I think it was a mix of being able to keep and continue to use a lot of the things that I have, like and relationships and knowledge that I've grown over the past 5 years in particular. But then also get to, like, put on a new pair of shoes, new different hat, and think a little bit differently about it, and really work with you all really tightly across the EMT was super exciting.
One thing you commented on, which I thought was funny, is like new email address, new hat, but the exact same equipment and tools. Chromebook, Pixel, Workspace.
Yeah, I set
running,
one lot back, got the new lot. I was like, could we have just done an invoice and left my Google gear here? But yeah, and that's interesting because I'm a Google fan. Like, I wouldn't have left Google from anywhere that wasn't still either with Google or something aligned to it.
It's interesting, like in most companies that are systems integrators or MSPs, they eventually create a function that is that manages all the alliances, right, and partnerships. And we finally have that, and Nikki Harley, and she's doing an amazing job for the broad-based set of alliances we have, which is growing. That team is growing. We're bringing some unique things to market by virtue of figuring alliances well. But the other, going into like defining the role now together, is that the Google Alliance itself is something that I was never going to let go. Like, it was my job. It's so fundamentally critical to the company that it is the job of the CEO.
Yeah.
So that's like one part of where I talked about, and again, the Google experience, and being chief of staff in the past for the enterprise business, like bringing that on to the executive team, my team, the leadership team, in where you get to actually enhance the alliance, make us operate even better within the framework of the alliance, but in a way that I'm not really out of that function, but we just get to do it better together.
Yeah.
Was so important. So it's like at least a third of the job, right? We're defining sort of chief of staff now for the audience, or chief of staff at SADA, what it means, because it means different things in different places. Just in the first few weeks, I already see a very significant change in how we're able to engage with Google, and that makes me really excited.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a place where there's sometimes I can speak both languages. I think that's a real benefit of having been inside Google. To your point earlier, if you have brought someone else who maybe had more channel experience or more sales or something else that in the mix there, I do think that given the commitment that SADA has to Google, that is going to be a really powerful thing that we can work on together for everybody's benefit. And actually, I feel like in some of the conversations I had as I was leaving Google, a lot of what I heard was like, "Oh, we're sad to lose you. Oh, but hey, that's going to be really good." And I was like, yeah, I think it is. Like, I think that was actually one of the things that I really, when I went through that process of leaving, the fact that the majority of like Googlers I really respect and asked about the decision and got their take on it was like, this is like a win-win-win all around. Like, we should do this. So I think that's been good to know there, and then I've also gotten to know more of the Googlers that you work with, who are fabulous partners we have, like Ahmed and others on the team. So that's been great.
Totally, but that's why like it had to be you for this role. Like it had to be Michelle for chief of staff, because again, it takes so long just to understand how things operate, and it's still a fresh enough set of eyes because the perspective is completely different, and it just makes us wiser and more aligned and better. I can do a lot of things, but I'm also aware enough to know that like I'm one type of instrument, like I'm a hammer, not everything's a nail. And now that I have you to, bring different perspective and ideas and strategies, like I feel a lot better. And I think I felt better like day one when you started. I was like, oh, Michelle's here. But even in the last like 4 or 5 weeks, I've seen the level of engagement, you just diving in, and it's so natural, and you're already like in the thick of it, right? Navigating some very complex things.
Yeah. No, it's been good to also start something, particularly transitioning during the pandemic. Like you were saying before, same equipment, same space, but also like it really does feel like a really nice continuous, like, oh, okay, I've just kind of flipped over here, and okay, I'm looking at a different part of the puzzle from a different angle, but like, where can I continue to be helpful and drive things? So it's felt very natural.
Yeah. And tomorrow will be the second time you're engaged with this part of the company, but the first time you're probably feeling like I'm somewhat in charge now. In our journey to become very resilient as an organization, the way that we build and operate a board of independent board members is super critical. Not only do how I and my team interface with the board, but how the board works together, how the committees function, how the board interfaces with all the executive management team. I'm really excited to have your partnership and help in that. And we're getting ready to announce several new board members I'm super excited about. So more on that later. So the team's going to get bigger and just more completely next level, I feel like, people we've never been surrounded by before. But what have you found to be the most interesting and challenging part of the board interaction and governance piece so far? I know it's very early, but how have you found that?
Yeah, it's pretty early, but I think interesting. I think you have a great foundation. So I really think actually when you were talking to, sometimes the way I think when we're talking about, I'm like, it's actually like pretty far along here with what we're starting to build, getting to know Wendy a little bit over the last few days. Like, she's fabulous. Who's our independent chairwoman. And yeah, I think that's just it's an important part of our maturity of like, how do we bring different parts of expertise to bear to really, like, you know, as you said, build that resilient sort of forever company that we're working towards. So it's also refreshing for me, I think, that like board view, that perspective, like a slightly different perspective on the business, and how do we think through that, and how do we, like, as SADA grows, make sure we're maturing and like getting that sort of like and I'm gonna like go way back Google time, but like Larry and Sergey used to joke about Eric Schmidt is like adult supervision. So I think it's like it's some of that evolution of like, okay, you're getting folks who've like been there, done that, and they're gonna help you figure out like, what do you need to think about, and what is the next step for the next 2 to 3 years. And personally, I think I'm someone who likes to look up and out and like ahead and think through possibilities. So I'm super excited about learning from the board and like figuring out how we take their insights and then bring them back into SADA to help us grow.
Part of having like a very small board is, you know, the committees can't all do all the things that we need to do. Now they're going to be able to. So I think that's going to be a new world for us. And, you know, we are in this unique position that we're actually self-selecting to build a board of independent members who are very diverse, by the way, and I love that. We're getting more diverse even. And when I say diversity, it's not just like men and women and, you know, other ethnicities. It's actually also like, to me, like industry diversity, geography diversity. I really love what we're building from that standpoint. But it's self-imposed. We don't have to do this as a private company. We're choosing to do it because we believe it's the types of things you want to do if you're earnest about wanting to build a forever company. Just that opportunity to be challenged the right way, to have a sounding board, have people around you that have done the things that you're going to do already a few times, right? Have scaled before, have run a public company if that's what we choose, right? These types of people are going to be just so valuable as our brain trust for the executive team. And yeah, I want to be held accountable to a board as a CEO as well. So I think that's every year. I don't necessarily have the required experience to run a SADA that's like that much bigger than it was last year. So just having that around is, I think, very authentic to the growth mindset that we have all throughout the company. Really, we wanted to demonstrate it from the top. And the other part is the third, I guess, leg of the stool. I know there's more, but the three main legs is, and we just went through an exercise for the first time in which we did it all together in as an executive team where you were in those sessions, and that was kind of laying the groundwork of this virtual offsite where we want to make sure as SADA grows that we're not committing the very typical unforced errors that companies tend to commit. And of course, there's a few of them, but one of the key ones is the way that the executive team and their respective functions interface with each other is hyper critical, because as there's added pressure and scale and complexity, those things sometimes, if they're not nurtured, they tend to fold under pressure, and all sorts of, you know, negative consequences that are suboptimal, you know, happen. But I'm so excited about having you as a chief of staff to be that functional and cultural glue almost amongst this amazing team.
I'm excited too, I think. And it's funny because this is technically the third time I've been a chief of staff, well, not technically is. And I think one of the things that I've learned over a couple of iterations of that as I grew in each of those roles, and they were for different sized businesses. The cool thing about the chief of staff is you're the one person in the room that actually doesn't, like, who's looking at the room. So it's like you're the one person when we're having that offsite, and everybody else is thinking about their team or their function, their deliverables, and your job is actually to look at that team and be like, how is this team doing? Like, do we have the pieces we need?
Right.
Where is the glue really sticky, or is the glue not sticky? Like, are there pieces that we're just all ignoring or avoiding, or like all of that stuff? So I think that's one piece that definitely not the first time. I didn't appreciate it the first time I was chief of staff, but when we finished that role, I had several of the folks who were on that leadership team tell me, like, a year later, like, when you came in and like facilitated us and like pushed us and like helped both grease the wheels but also call us out sometimes, they were like, that changed the dynamic. It was hard for me to see because I didn't know what it was before I was there. And that's been something, I think, my mix of change management, project management, like 2 of the years I spent at Google, I was planning and operations for Google's L&D team. So I got to kind of really sit in on the folks who think about leadership and, at Google, and how that, so I really, like, again, privileged and blessed, but learned from them as well. So I feel like that's one part I feel really passionately about bringing to the team. And
L&D is just so critical to the whole picture of things that can go wrong from an unforced error standpoint. But I think it starts with literally L&D at the executive level and cascades, all throughout the company.
Right. And I was going to say,
I like that. Like,
yeah, that exact,
the person in the room who's looking at the room. I love that. He's actually looking at the room.
Yeah. I'm watching it. I'm not worrying about what's happening, what I'm going to take away from it, or what I need to put into it. And I do think it was the L&D, but it was also like how that team functioned as a leadership team. Like Karen May, who was previous VP, she, like, I really will say there was a lot I learned and saw from her leadership team about how they showed up and how they coached other Google leaders. So,
it takes a very kind of unique type of person to be able to do this job well, but also these types of roles well. And here's how I'll frame it. I'll let you kind of articulate what it means to you. But one of the key success criteria for this role is for someone to be able to direct and influence and guide things, people, and resources they don't directly control. What's your approach to that? It seems to come so naturally for you, but it's so admirable for me, because I don't believe in like authoritarian sort of directive in general. Like, yeah, you can ultimately tell people what to do if they report to you, but unless they understand the why and are excited about it, they're not going to do a good job. And for me, when I'm telling people what to do, sometimes I don't know if they're just doing it because I'm the CEO or if they're doing it because, like, I've directed them the right way. But in your role, like, you don't have a bunch of direct reports yet. You have to get all these people, executives, non-executives, SADA people, Googlers, to like go on this journey with you. So how do you do it?
I think there's a couple things that come to play. I think I bring innately, and this is why when I found Google like home, and I feel like SADA are similarly like home, and it goes right back to where I grew up. I do think like an owner. Like, I grew up in my parents' own businesses. So I grew up going, oh, that's a problem. We need to fix that. So I think there's a mindset that is more we than I that's critical. Because I think if you come into that, even if I need to get this done because it's important, so I need you to do A for me, it gets everyone's back up. Like, and you're starting the conversation or trying to get to the outcome with a like selfish motivation. So I think having the goal and then I think establishing that goal, or like being really clear about like, here's my goal and here's my intention, is a really important part of that process. I'm always a fan of bringing folks along with you. She's somebody who's telling me the other day, apparently my Australian accent helps with that. I can say hard things to people that take it too badly. That's news to me.
But I don't know where all the magic. No,
I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. I was like, g'day more often when I start a sentence and see if that changes things. But I do think there's an intention of like good mutual outcomes that I generally tend to like, hey, how can we get, and also explicit if there's like downsides for folks and helping them through the process. I think a big part is like starting with we. and painting a picture of like why whatever it is you want to get done is important. I try to take time to listen and understand people's motivations as well. I think that's something else that I think also, I've played this role a few times. There's clearly attributes I have that lean into that. And there was, if you've ever done StrengthsFinder, they have one called individualization, which is like you're able to like understand what people need in a situation. And so I think that is one strength I'm fast to pick up, like, hey, what do they care about? Okay, cool. How do I, so it's very much sort of almost structuring a negotiation. Yeah. How do I figure out what everybody in the room cares about, and where is the middle ground and where is the real conflict, and understanding that quickly.
Doing that in an environment that's supposed to be designed to create multi-way wins, to align incentives the right way. And sometimes the design's bad and you discover that too and you change the design. But again, I think if the design is there, or the intention behind the design is there, the game is ours to do well in or not do well in. It's completely in our hands. Just having the patience and poise and the gravitas to kind of put it together in the right way so that we can overcome those, whatever challenge we may be facing, is such an important part of our journey. Because again, even in our conversations with Google or with customers, like if you trust the intent, then the journey is not to figure out who's right, who's wrong, but like to figure out the right answer.
Yeah.
You certainly enhance that for me, because I often don't have the patience. Like when something is super clear to me, I'm like, why? And you're like, hey, this is why maybe, and we'll figure it out. So that's great for me, because I think, again, like 9 out of 10 times we're going to see things the same way, but you're going to have a different approach to solving the problem than my hammer, which is like, doesn't always work. It's not the best tool all the time. But it's a very special set of skills. And I think it's super important to our alliance with Google. It's super important to how the board gels and works together, and equally important in how our different departments and department leaders work together. We just essentially have to make sure we don't get in our own way.
If things are going good, it's easy to just look at what's going well and not do the hard work on the other pieces that, as you said, at some point they may come up to trip you up. They may not be obvious right now because, you have growth in a growing market. So you're like, oh, we're good. We don't have to worry about that. But I think I've been really impressed. Like 5 weeks in with SADA, I think you hold and the team holds themselves to a really high bar around that, which is super impressive.
Last 20 years, Michelle, imagine we haven't had anybody to be like, except for our partners, of course, customers, that kind of market feedback. We do want to be our biggest, critic. We do want to hold very high standards, not because we're idealistic. We just think that all those things we want to achieve are possible. We just think that a net promoter score of 75 is doable. Like we just believe these things. Like we believe this kind of growth is totally doable. We believe having an immensely wonderful place to work where everybody loves their managers and respects their peers is totally achievable. So not doing it seems like the lazy thing. And then if you hold yourself to the very highest standards, then generally speaking, it'll be rare for you to disappoint a customer or disappoint your partners or each other. Look, it's amazing to be recording this on, Women's History Month as well. Adding an amazing female powerhouse to the executive team is another unlock. More the better. And we can't wait to continue this journey together. It's just so early in the first few weeks, but we already feel the impact. And I'm so happy that we get to share this initial story of this genesis, this origin story of how this all came about with our Cloud and Clear audience. And with that, I'll let you take us out with any final words.
Sure. Well, Tony, thank you for the opportunity and for the start. Like I said, it's felt natural. It's like a natural transition to a space that I'm really enjoying. I've been so impressed with the team. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for what we're going to get done together. And just a huge thank you.
Awesome. Well said. Thanks for being my guest. I can't wait to see what the year and years ahead have in store for both of us and for SADA. Thank you.
Me too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, SADA.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.